I'd like to share with you the perspectives I see in salespeople and to see if you see any parallels within your team, and then hopefully some suggestions of what to do about it. One of the realities of selling is that most sales organizations, most salespeople are fiercely independent. An example is that most businesses are like a fort in the wilderness. And to keep the fort fed, you've hired a bunch of mountain men and women, hunters, to go out and get you food. Now they're all fiercely independent. Each have completely different styles or approaches to selling. Each has a completely different choice of weapons and tools they're going to use. And they enjoy being a loner. Now they've all disappeared in the woods to go get you food. Now we as managers have no idea where they are when we're in the fort. But every once in a while we do see some smoke and we hear some gunfire. And every once in a while one of them breaks through the woods dragging a dead carcass behind to keep the fort fed. Now food consumption's up, but we have no idea when and how they're doing it, and we have no idea how to help them get better. Any of this sound familiar? Now, I've also had some managers tell me we also have another problem, and that is we have some salespeople, mountain men and women, we can't get outside the fort. And they stand right in the doorway with a gun ready to shoot anything that walks in, but it has to walk in the fort before they claim it as a sale. But once they shoot it, they'll say, hey, I hunted, I got it. Even worse, if you as a manager went and said, I want to ride with you next week, they'll tell you four things. The first is, why are you picking on me? The second is, don't you have anything better to do? The third is, you know you're going to slow me down. And the fourth is, you're probably going to get hurt. And because of that, I watch this fierce independence. You'll have one salesperson that's doing exceptional, but the skills and the information of their success doesn't tend to get transferred to others. How accurate is that to the perspective of what you see in the salespeople, especially the successful salespeople that you see? My whole focus, working with experienced people, is how do we help them get better? One of the challenges I watch with these very experienced salespeople is they tend to be so independent, they really don't want anybody else involved in the selling process. So you get silos in the organization, where the equipment salespeople are very effective at their job, but really mention nothing about service until after the sale. And the service and the equipment salespeople don't talk very well together, so you have one independent individual selling and making the sale, and not using the entire organization to communicate your value and uniqueness. And you have such conflicting differences because of this independence. This is a shift happening in selling. This is a change happening in selling, is how do we move from this independent mountain man or woman to being more like a SWAT team, the police SWAT team, where with one learns, all benefits. As successful as salespeople are, I still tend to see three trends in individuals. See how many of these trends fit your people. The first is most salespeople tend to be very intuitive. What's interesting to me is most salespeople have never been through formal sales training. I ask in my programs, raise your hand if you have been through at least 2 weeks of full-time sales training sometime in your career. Not 20 half-day programs, but 2 weeks. Involving steps of a sales call, giving feedback on how you come across, maybe even videotaping your sales calls. And less than 5% of the salespeople I talk to raise their hand. Most salespeople learn to sell the way my dad learned how to swim. When my father was a young man in the 1930s, at the age of 8, he went down to the local YMCA in Cincinnati where he lived. And he walked up to the lifeguard and says, my mother says you're supposed to teach me how to swim. The lifeguard said, happy to help you. Takes my dad out on the end of the diving board in the deep end and says, see all those other boys are moving their arms and kicking their feet? And my dad said yes. And the lifeguard says, you better do it now, and shoved him off the board. Does that describe how any of your salespeople sold or sell today? Where even though they're successful, even though they have years of experience, they never really formally learned the structures of selling. So they tend to be very intuitive. And they're really good on some calls, and others not so much. But after all, one of the joys of selling is if a sales call crashes and there's no manager around, did it count? Well, salespeople usually like to say no. The reality of this process, especially as managers and leaders of salespeople, is we have to help even our best people get better. And part of doing that is to make sure they have all the structures and processes of selling in place. And they're not just intuitively selling the way my dad intuitively swam. Because to my father, over his entire life, swimming was never a skill. It was survival. Because he had no structures. He had no process. He was just surviving. The reality of managers, of what we need to do, is we need to take them from being intuitive and help give them more structure, more process, more consistency. If we look at the average, especially if we look at selling, one of the realities I think we have to talk about is how different every one of the selling environments are for your people because of being an international company, all of the individual countries you're selling in. But there are consistent structures that are independent of country or culture. One of the ways we can look at selling is if you look, there are 3 major skills of selling necessary for success. The first level skill is your operational skills. Your knowledge of the steps of a sales call is an operational skill. Your personal persuasive skills are operational. Your ability to develop relationships and be able to build friendships with your customers to increase the persuasive environment are all operational skills. The second set of skills, though, are tactical skills. Tactical skills deal with the process or structures of selling. From the time you identify a new opportunity till the time your salesperson closes the sale, what are the steps of that process? That's a tactical discussion. The third skill is your strategic skills, your philosophy, approach, positioning, your brand are all strategic. As I get to work internationally and see all the different industries, what I watch is every industry is different. Every culture, every country is different, but the differences are at the operational level. How you build a relationship is going to be different in each country, slightly different at least, because of the cultures that are there. My problem, though, when I talk to salespeople is because of this fierce independence, they fear the entire selling process is unique. So that what's working in one country tends to have little transference to the other, not because of the reality that it works, but because of the bias of the salespeople. Has that described any of your people? Has it described all of your people? And the reality of the process is for us as managers to help take our people to the next level, this structure and consistency is critical. The second piece to this is how do we get our people to be more proactive? Too many salespeople are completely reactive. As an example, I'm the salesperson, you're the customer. And I come to call on you. You're an existing customer. Here is the sales call. How is everything going? Anything you need. Anything coming up. Anything I can help with. Any problems I need to get involved with. Any other opportunities coming up that you see that we can help with. Anything else I can do to be of assistance. Want to do lunch. What was wrong with that sales call? Besides no budget for lunch anymore. But what was wrong with that sales call? It was completely reactive, wasn't it? If there was any initiation of activity out of that call, who was going to have to initiate the action? In that example, the customer, wasn't it? Because the salesperson was so reactive. Our goal is how do we get salespeople to be more proactive? We need initiators, not responders. We need arsonists, not firefighters. And part of that process as a manager is how do we help make sure? How many of your people really don't know what's going to happen for the week until they come in Monday morning and check their emails and check their voicemails? Because their market is determining what happens versus them having a path and process. Now, I hope your people are more on the right-hand side of the screen, that they're more structured, they're more proactive. But the reality is most people aren't. Most salespeople aren't. And the final problem is most salespeople tend to only think one move ahead. Ask one of your salespeople to think about their best account. Whatever their best or most important account that they have that's coming up. And then you want to ask as a manager 3 questions and write down what they say. The first question, you ask them to say, are you ready? They say yes. To say, okay, first question. I'm sure if this is your most important account, you know and have something scheduled to go see that customer. So the first question is, what do you want to accomplish on the next call to that account? And then you write down what they say. It'll usually be a pretty strong list for this first call. I've had as many as 8 or 10 items. Then turn the page. Second question. What are you going to do on your second call to that account? And then get ready to write down what they say. What do you think the most common answer I hear to that kind of question is? This is the interactive part of the program, just to let you know. In this process, though, the second question is, what do you want to accomplish on the next call to that account? Most salespeople, the most common answers I hear are, whatever I didn't get done on the first call, that's what I'll do on the second. Turn the page and say, okay, third question. What are you going to do on your third call to that account? Now, I hope your people are different, but the majority of salespeople I ask this Hilary Bird test of have a great answer for the first call, but the second and the third are all dependent on the first. Here's the challenge. If you and I are playing chess, and I only think one move ahead, but you think 2 moves, how many games will you win? All of them, won't you? So how many moves ahead are your salespeople thinking? And our goal as a manager, our goal as a leader of a sales team, is to help improve that structure in that process. One of the things that dramatically changed my life in my business, because I do consulting, training, and speaking in sales and sales management, is in the mid-1980s, I started my business in '82. In the mid-1980s, my customers, because most of them are manufacturers, started getting involved in all of the quality programs, ISO 9000, Six Sigma, and all the other ones that exist. And as I looked at those quality processes, I was so impressed with what I saw. And as I studied all these different quality processes, to me, they all tended to have the same 4 philosophies in their programs. If you look at any quality program, it tends to be a 4-step process. The first step is to start measuring and tracking what your people are doing now. Then the second step is to identify a set of best practices that can help them get even better. Then the third step is through training, coaching, yelling, screaming. You get your people from where they are closer to the best practices. And then finally, as soon as you get close to the best practices, step 4 is you raise the standards for both continuous quality improvement and just to irritate the hell out of your people, which is really just the side benefit of management. I'll tell you what, this will be a joke, this will be a significant thought. Will that help you kind of keep it straight just to make sure? Now, what impressed me about these quality processes is I watched my customers first implement all the quality programs in manufacturing. Reduction of waste, increasing of profitability, lowering of costs, increasing throughput times, all these benefits. I watched them apply it to the administrative side of their business. Improved paper process, reduced cost, all these other things. And then I'll ask a company that has achieved those kind of goals in manufacturing and administration, tell me how you've applied these concepts to your sales force. The average response I get is, they sell the benefits of us being quality certified. And I'll say, well, that's fine, but tell me how you've improved your sales force through these quality processes. And I've not yet seen a company that's applied that because of that independent mountain man or woman mentality of the sales force.